Hello everybody. Today we are going over the second week of social culture anthropology. Again, like I said, this is my favorite subject. Not only because I'm trained in this subject, but also, when you break down culture and you break down a society, you really understand, in my opinion, like the most unique part of being human, right? So anyways, today we are talking about A Thug's Life to Chef's Knife. So if you have not watched that video yet, please watch it before watching this lecture. It's a very good video. You can skip the Mexican food part, but it's a really good video. So, real quickly, some announcements. Please make sure to read and watch our material. Make sure to do this week's quizzes by Friday, and also Reflection 3 is due by Friday. The midterm will be next week. Okay, so the midterm will cover social culture anthropology, obviously, and archaeology. All right, I have posted a review. Please go through the review. I will host a meeting on Zoom, probably on let's see, probably I'm gonna say Monday late at night. Yeah. I'll say Monday like 9:30 p.m. Okay, because unfortunately, some of you already know this. I have a lot of jobs and they don't end early. But that being said, Monday 9:30 p.m. If you have questions and cannot make this meeting, that is no problem. Shoot me an email and I'll make sure to answer you in the video. And then later on, obviously, I will post the video so everyone can see it. Okay. But I'll get back to you through the announcements. About when the review will go down. Okay, and for my hybrid class, obviously the review will be on Thursday. Okay. So, Thug's Life to Chef's Knife. Please watch this video if you have not watched it yet. All right. So, after watching the video, what's your reaction and response? Okay, just real quickly, just off the top of your head, what do you think about the video yourself? Okay. What do you find interesting about it? What do you find not interesting about it? Whatever. Okay. And then the next one is, I want you to think a little bit about how can we apply some of the social cultural anthropological concepts to Diablo's life. Even like more superficially, like where can you apply some of the words, the vocab that we use, like acculturation, like what's it called? Ethnicity, race, nationality. How can we apply those concepts to Diablo's life? And if you can go even deeper, okay, which is the third one, which concepts is video validate? I want you to think about how does culture fit into Diablo's life? How does our mainstream understanding of culture not fit into this video? And what does that suggest about our mainstream interpretation of culture? Okay, and we're going to go over this, obviously. I just want you to kind of percolate on that, kind of think about it a little bit before we move on. All right. So these are just some anthropological concepts that I think is really important, right? So culture, I put 3 stars there because it's very important. Ethnicity, race, and nationality, right? So think back to the jelly beans. Think about Diablo, right? Like what's his jelly bean, right? So his ethnicity, let's say, is a yellow like mango, right? But his race is what? His race is Asian, right? So the yellow jelly bean, even though it's yellow, might be, banana, might be like lemon or whatever. And finally, nationality, right? This is where it gets a little spicy, right? So like nationality-wise, he is actually Korean, right? But ethnically, is he Korean? No, right? Ethnically, he's American, right? But nationality-wise, he's Korean, and that's why he got sent back in the first place, right? It's because obviously there are certain rules pertaining to people that were immigrants here when they were young, and because when he committed the crime at that time, he was not a full citizen, and so he got sent back to Korea, right? And that's an interesting dynamic right there, right? Where race, ethnicity, and nationality don't always fall into this cookie-cutter situation, because his race is Asian, yes. However, his ethnicity, what is his ethnicity actually, right? What about his upbringing is Korean or Korean American? Little to none, right? And then his nationality, though, funny enough, even though he speaks no Korean, is Korean because of where he came from when he was sent over here to get adopted. Okay. The next thing is globalization, right? How does us being able to travel back and forth, to send adoptees back and forth, to be able to use the internet, how did that affect Diablo's life, right? Because without this globalized world, without really the ease of transportation, right? Because like, look, we take it for granted, right? I can fly, like, the cheapest ticket I found is like round trip to China, like $600-$700. That's freaking cheap. You can drive across like 4 or 5 states and you'd spend that much just on gas, right? So how does the accessibility of transportation and ultimately globalization change Diablo's life? Well, first of all, the fact that he was in America as an adoptee is already a huge difference, right? Think about 100 years in the past. Not even 100, think about 50 years in the past. It's not that easy to fly from country to country. But now, because of globalization, things are easier. Think about Mexican food in Korea, right? Like, how the heck did Mexican food end up in Korea? Well, it's because of people like Diablo that traveled or that have experience with other cuisines. They are able to open that type of restaurant in Korea and thus create, again, a more globalized society or a globalized world, which is very interesting because, again, without these interacting forces, without these histories and technologies and everything, Diablo would be in a completely different situation than he is in this video. And finally, situational negotiation, right? Situational negotiation, for those of you that forgot, is using different identities or different statuses for different situations. That's all it is. So, in terms of Diablo, right, when you ask him, oh, what's your background, what do you think he'll say? And why? Right? And that's why it's very important. It's like, when you think about like being Korean for him, let's say he says he's Korean, like how much of that is true? Is he just saying that because he looks Korean? Right? When he says American, how will you react? How will people react if they don't know his story? Right? So there's a lot of like interesting things there, okay? And the last thing is culture, okay? So in my Harvard class, we talked about culture as not just this like bullet point list of cultural traits, right? Chinese people believe that red is good luck. American people wear black to a funeral. Yes, these are cultural facts. But what's important, the most important part about culture, is that culture is a system, right? There's different working parts. And when you change one part, the rest of everything else changes, right? And the example we gave last lecture was the women working after World War II, right? It's just that a lot of women started working just for more money, but it ended up changing the whole dynamic of the workplace in society, right? And it changed the whole dynamic of like microwavable dinners. It changed the whole dynamic of a lot of things, cultural dynamic of a lot of things, right? So with Diablo, I really want you to think about like what cultural factors led Diablo on the path that he went on. Okay. So after pondering that, hopefully for a little bit, let's talk about some of the important points that I want to bring up. Culture is not just geographical. Culture is much more, right? So when we're talking about Diablo, a lot of people are really focused on Mexican, Korean, and being American, right? And yes, those are important factors, but why are they important, right? You need to understand that, again, like his ability to be Korean or Mexican or American all depends on the things that people do day to day. How Korean is he if the family that adopted him isn't Korean? How Mexican is he if he's living in Korea? How American is he if he's living in Korea, right? So we also need to consider that, again, a lot of people like to focus on like, oh, these are just cultural traits of someone from another country. We also need to focus on the different systems that led him down the path that he went. The foster care system, the public education system, the justice system, and the immigration system. The foster care system in America, right, that cultural system is what started Diablo on his life to begin with, right? Because it is not uncommon for American, I guess, organizations to arrange for Korean adoptees to get adopted in America, right? So that's the foster care system that already set the stage for Diablo's life, right? And it's no surprise, like if you have experience with this foster care system, whether it's personally or from another source, you know how it is in America. Do you think that that foster care system is exactly the same as another country, as in Korea, for example, or as in Mexico? Of course not. It's very different, right? And again, that is something that is distinctly American. This only exists out here, right? And in his case, it probably only existed in Southern California, right? So let's talk like that's an important cultural system that most people probably wouldn't think about when they're thinking about culture in relationship to Diablo. The next thing is the public education system, right? The public education system, the way that they treated him, the way that he looked at education, the way that he looked at school, the you know, in America you need to go to school, like you will be legally penalized if you don't go to school, right? These are all things that influenced his decisions in the future, right? The friends that he hung out with, these are all things that happened in school for him. So again, think about his life without the foster care system. Completely different. Think about his life without the public education system. Again, completely different. Okay? And finally, the justice system, right? The justice system in America, the way that they penalize people, the way that they send people to juvie, the way that they, penalized Diablo, that is another massive factor that led to Diablo becoming, or opening a Mexican restaurant in Korea, right? And finally, the immigration system. The immigration system where if you are basically if you come here as an adoptee and you're not a citizen and you commit certain crimes, you have a certain felony on your record, you will be deported back to wherever you're from, right? These systems, imagine Diablo's life without any one of these systems, right? His whole freaking life would change. And that's what we're talking about, right? When we're talking about culture, we're talking about something that has ripple effects, right? Where it's like, when you take one thing out, it's not just that one thing, it's the whole system that's going to change. Okay? So when we're talking about culture, let's not just focus on geographical definitions of culture, right? Where it's like, Mexican people eat like tortillas, Korean people eat tofu. Like, those aren't important, at least in anthropology, right? What's important are the systems in our lives that influence the way we act, right? And again, I'll bring back like the working day schedule cultural system in America, right? Where it's like, let's say, I know everyone's a little different, but let's say your average work day is 9 to 5. It is no surprise that your kid's school, starts at 8:20, 8:30, because guess what? You got to drop off your kid and then go to work. It is no surprise that, after school programs last until 6:30. Why? Because after you get off work, you go pick up your kid. It is no surprise that dinner is set up at 7, let's say, because again, after you get back home, you want to go out to eat, you don't want to cook. Most restaurants are going to be full at that time, or they're prepared to serve you at that time because that's when most people are around and at home. So when we're talking about cultural systems, foster care, public education, justice system, immigration system are just like that. If you change one thing, you end up changing the whole thing. Okay? Although most people would emphasize the Mexican-American culture of Diablo's upbringing, the cultural factors listed above are truly what culturally shaped Diablo's life the most. These cultural factors are distinctive to his place in the USA. Deportation, education, jail, foster care system only look like this in the United States. So again, it is important to separate popular culture from anthropology's definition of culture. Okay? So popular culture is like, stuff that's like, again, like we talked about before, things that are like, things that are like so general that they don't really influence directly the behavior of people that we're studying, right? So yes, is Fortnite a massive cultural icon? Yes. But no one talks about, not no one, but it is more important to talk about the influence of Fortnite on 5th graders, let's say, because that's who play them the most or whatever. Okay, so it's talking about the things that shape our lives the most, right? Is Michael Jackson a huge cultural icon? Absolutely. However, is that the type of day-to-day stuff that anthropologists pay attention to? Not as much. Okay? So, what are some of the cultural challenges that Diablo faced in Korea? Okay, so think about it this way. Like, if you were to move to a new country, what challenges would you face? Okay? And more importantly, what challenges did Diablo face and not face because he was moving to Korea? Okay? So, when you think about Diablo's challenges, right? I guarantee you he had such a hard time. He speaks no Korean in Korea, right? He had to have a hard time, okay? Like just think about like just everything, like buying food, finding somewhere to live, I don't know, just like freaking like think about the things you do day to day, right? Imagine applying to college in another country. That's freaking, I can't even imagine that. Imagine applying for a job in another country. You need to have a working understanding of the cultural situations in that country in order to adequately live in that society. Otherwise, you're going to be super confused, right? And what's interesting is if you think about your day-to-day life and what you do every day and how different it would be in another country, you realize that all the things we do in our day-to-day are all modified by culture. All of them, right? One of the fun things when I went to China was like, at least in the area that I was at, they would sleep pretty late considering how early they woke up. They slept at like 11, 12, 1, and they'd wake up at like 6 or 7, which is for me pretty early. And I was like, geez, and they're like high functioning, right? We would go out to eat at night, we would have fun, and they'd still wake up that early. But then I realized that after lunch, they would all take a nap, right? Now imagine that practice in America. Would that be possible? Of course not, because all of the way that we work, the way that our society is set up, that is not a possibility, right? It would cause a lot of chaos, let's say. However, where I was in China, that's just how everyone did things, and so it was a normal part of the day. Like, if you tried to find a lunch spot at like 2 p.m., unless you went to like a chain, it was going to be pretty difficult to find somewhere to eat, right? Because everyone's napping. And that's important because is it that naps are bad or that not napping is bad? Not really. It's more about different ways of doing things, different cultural systems, right? So again, everything we do from like food to drink to sleeping to everything is modified by culture, okay? It is important to think of culture as something that is comprehensive and not just focused on perceived geographical cultures. Cultural influences in our lives exist in every aspect of our life, modifying our natural urges, such as sleeping, sex, food, water, and bodily waste. Okay? And when I talk about perceived geographical cultures, when you think that someone from this region, from this place, that looks like this, acts a certain way, it's not to say that that necessarily is wrong, but you need to understand that this is a perceived understanding of that culture, right? It's like everyone's going to assume certain things, but you need to understand that that's an assumption, not a truth, right? Okay, just like if you saw Diablo, would you expect him to have that background? Of course not. Of course not, right? And it's because we assume that he's a certain way because of the way he looks, and that's okay. But you need to understand that that is just a perception. Okay. All right, so I hope you guys found that one was interesting. The next one is very interesting. We talk about gender and sex. So please make sure to read and watch our material. Make sure to do this week's quizzes by Friday. Reflection 3 is due on Friday, and the midterm will be next week. All right, everyone have a nice night, and yeah, we'll talk soon.